Here we have PhD Eray. We're going to talk about a super tech society. We're going to talk about everything from decentralized governments and the technological society and how AI fits into our transhumanist vision for the future, both technological and sociological affordances of the transhumanist technologies. But before that, I have a little bit of new housekeeping to run through. We've got a bunch of sponsors. So we got a brand new sponsor jumping on board. That's Talk Spectrum. They're going to be jumping on board as well, in addition to all the other ones, Project 222 and TAFs. Talk Spectrum is basically concerned with neurological freedom. They endorse ideas that your cognitive thoughts, your nervous system is your own, and it shouldn't be being held hostage by government entities or extra judicial entities. Now, another piece of news I have to run to is TAFs. TAFs says we have news. The theme for TAFs magazine, it's TAFs magazine. That's Transdisciplinary Gorga for the Future Discussions, United States company. The nature of the magazine. The magazine is a global-centered magazine and welcomes write-ups from Africa, Europe, America, and Asia. Basically, it focuses on getting groundbreaking articles in philosophy, artificial intelligence and robotics, biotechnology, nanotechnology, digital fabrications, theorism, networks and computing system, medicine, neuroscience, design, entrepreneurship, communication, finance and economics, future studies and forecasting, policy and law, ethics, neuroweapons, humanitarian challenges, and balanceology. Investigations are political corruption, serious crimes, and corporate wrongdoings. They do reviews and constructive criticism, which involve administrative reviews, political reviews, reviews of machine books, company reviews. They also do evaluations and nominations. 5 best books of the year, 5 best corporate leaders of the year, 5 best presidents of the year, 5 best entrepreneurs of the year, 20 best keynote speakers, 10 best activists in the world. They also do annual advertisements. Submission of articles is free. If the article is approved for publication by the editorial board, they will send you an email notification. The last date for submission of this round is the 20th of November 2019. So if you're looking at writing for any of these tickle your interest, jump in and before the 20th of November, and you can have your article peer reviewed by a crack team over there. And that's Samit Sharma, PhD, who sent us this update. So that's TAF Magazines, and the link will be in the description. That's the news from TAFs, another organization who thinks that detonation is worth anything in the world. So thanks to Talk Spectrum, thanks to 222, and thanks to TAFs, and thanks to Eray. Eray, you're another one. Do you think that detonation is okay? And I'm really glad to have you here. Eray is obtained a PhD in computer engineering from how do I say that? Bilkent University, Ankara, which is in Turkey.
Right.
Good city in Turkey.
Right.
He has a deep and long-running interest. Yeah, he has a deep and long-running interest in human-level AI. His name appears in the acknowledgements of Marvin Minsky's The Emotion Machine. That's pretty cool. He has collaborated briefly with the founder of an algorithmic information theory, Ray Solomonoff, and in response to a challenge he posed, he invented heuristic algorithmic memory, the emotion machine. He's collaborated. He invented the heuristic algorithmic memory, which is a long-term memory design for the general purpose of machine learning. Some other researchers have been inspired by HAM, the heuristic algorithmic machine, and called the approach a Bayesian program learning. He has designed the next generation of general-purpose machine learning architecture. He is a recipient of the 2015 Kurzweil Best AGI Idea Award for his theoretical contribution to universal induction. He has previously invented the FPGA virtualization scheme for the Global Supercomputer Incorporated, which was internationally patented. He has proposed a cryptocurrency called Cypher, an energy-based currency which can drive green energy proliferation. You may find his blog at log.xmachina.net. Some of his software projects are free at GitHub /X-Machine, and I'll leave those in the comments if you want me to, Eray. I can do that for you.
Well, please do.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. I'll leave those in there. And
because okay, that's not X machine. All right, that's Exa machine.
Exa machine, right? Yeah, sure. And I'll also be leaving another one in there in the comments section, which you asked me to do, is a AI philosophy group on Facebook. Yeah.
Right. So we founded AI philosophy community with Marvin Minsky. Is a continuation of comp.ai.philosophy Usenet group. So there was a lot of discussion, but we thought it needed some more moderation, or I don't know, like mailing list was easier to manage, so it actually worked well. And thanks to Marvin, a lot of really smart people joined, and we had a lot of great discussions, and I suppose it's one of the earliest transhumanist communities as well. The same people are interested in both transhumanism and AI, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, hopefully everything goes well, and you guys can continue to have philosophical debates and discussions on AI. I mean, Marvin Minsky is no small name. He's a giant actually in this world. And so that's that's the point. Is if you're jumping into that group, get ready for some solid discussion, right?
Right. So it's really the whole spectrum of philosophy of AI and cognitive science. So we talk about neuroscience, philosophy of mind, but also anything that's intellectually related to AI, including transhumanism. So I think a lot of people will find the discussion there quite interesting. So it's a mix of analytic philosophy, but also everything else like the zeitgeist and research directions, everything really. So it's like the broader spectrum of AI community and folklore, right?
Hey, do you want a Nobel Prize now? I mean, Greta Thunberg. They nominated her for a prize. So although she did a valuable contribution by yelling at incredibly powerful people, I mean, she's done nothing on the scale of what you've done, or some of these people have done. I mean, does it, do you want a prize or what?
Nobel Peace Prize? Yeah, that'd be cool. But so far, I haven't really contributed much to world peace. Like, if you discount all my attacks on neo-Nazis, I don't really contribute much to peace. But I'm going to try to present. well, I think you might deserve one too, right? Because you're analyzing a lot of progressive politics issues on your show. So that's still more work than what Greta did, personally. But
that's
what
point,
Thunberg represents is not just her own ideas. You see, so it's just an emotional launch pad for a very reasonable objection to the way the world is going on. And this has been going on for so long that I think it's quite poignant to honor her courage and contribution to the matter. It's the one issue that nobody can neglect.
Let's use that as a segue into systems analysis, because you know, one of your first topics you wanted to talk about is decentralized governance. And if you're talking about decentralized governance, you're talking about, you know, essentially a computer processing power that's greater than the human mind, right? It's consuming more energy. It's sorting through more data. It's sorting through, yeah, a greater complexity of themes. You know, so firstly, why is it a good idea to at least talk about decentralized governance? I mean, most people don't even think about it when they're talking about decentralized intelligence running generic technology. So they don't object to AI running components of Facebook, which is social governments, or they don't argue with elements of AI running you know, trains, or you know, or their traffic light systems in their city, which is transport governance. But then you get to decentralized governance, which is laws and human rights and you know, governmental factors that influence states, and then suddenly it becomes a problem. Why is decentralized governance a topic?
Well, so there are so many reasons, legitimate ones too. But before we get into that, like, well, it's not just about AI. You see, AI systems, like human-level AI systems, artificial general intelligence, supposedly can run on a decentralized platform, which is what I'm trying to build in my commercial venture. But that's not really the point of decentralized governance. When we talk about decentralized governance, we really talk about governance as we know it, you know, among people, citizens. So you're right. And why is that important? Well, as you know, the scamularity happened last year, and so that was the Bitcoin rally that every nerd on earth was very excited about, because they thought, all right, you know, this is going to, you know, keep increasing as an exponential series, so I can make a lot of money. Each and every one of us is going to, you know, be a millionaire at least. Some of us are going to become billionaires, because this is just going to, you know, keep rising exponentially. And some of our colleagues even called it exponential finance. However, you know, that was not quite realistic, because, you know, you run into those pesky limits of the physical world, I suppose, and so it had to crash and burn, right? We all know that story. And a lot of ICO projects raised a lot of money and did precisely nothing. Now, all those all that money probably sits in offshore accounts of VCs and rich people, and absolutely nothing is getting done except a few, you know, small things, but nothing like the billions invested in those projects, especially EOS, which raised like $4 billion just in the ICO, and then more later. I don't know, like, how many billions of dollars they raised, but it does absolutely nothing, you know, like, it's just, you know, you can emulate it with just a few smart contracts on Ethereum. It's really pathetic. It really does nothing, by the way. Okay, so if anyone bought an EOS, make sure you sell it at the top, right? If you can, of course. Now, now that's never going to work, by the way. So cryptocurrency, well, however, you know, is an interesting idea. It's very interesting because it provides peer-to-peer commerce. So, well, we have e-commerce, but it's centralized, right? I mean, you go through a PayPal, which is a centralized entity. There's a server farm somewhere. That's how it works. But with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, you don't need a central server. It's completely decentralized. It works peer-to-peer, like torrent. And so there are very few applications that work in this fully peer-to-peer mode, right? There's torrent, you know, and there's Bitcoin, and there isn't much anything else, really. So it's an emerging technology, but it's just like the you know, beginning ways of the internet. Like when you have I mean, we used to have the Mozilla browser and it barely worked, and it took like half an hour to download a porn picture, right? So that's how crappy internet was, and I bet you were there and looking for porn, and it was so hard to do back then. But nowadays you have Pornhub, which is like a true utopia. You know, is the pinnacle of mankind's greatest achievements, right? It's a true utopia, and although still centralized, is quite free in terms of sexual liberty and whatnot. Now, obviously, this peer-to-peer thing has a lot of potential, and this is what the internet was designed for. It was the real, design principle that you could just send a packet from point A to point B without, having to go through a central authority. So if one authority tried to block you, you could always pick another, and we call that, routing around the obstacles, right? So the internet always finds a way, like it's magical, you can never really stop it. You build a firewall to block some people from viewing some pages, and they find a way around it. Like there are proxies and all kinds of technologies that allow you to view that banned content in countries where that works. So they banned all the porn sites in Turkey because they're so sensitive about young people viewing porn, or I don't know, like it's illegal according to the law, or I don't know, they're religious. I don't know what's the deal really, because so the pop stars, like the pop singers, they're pretty much like soft porn stars. I don't know what's the deal. Like it doesn't even make sense. But they block those porn sites, and our teenagers. All of them are now like IP protocol experts, right? Like, as a consequence of that, and they also block Wikipedia, but nobody looks at Wikipedia. Everybody wants Pornhub, and now you have to go to Pornhub, and to do that, you have to try a bunch of proxy applications, Tor network, whatever, so you can break that kind of obstacle. You can unchain yourself using the affordances of the internet protocol, right? Now the basic protocol is supposed to be location independent. It shouldn't restrict you by where you live, how rich you are, if you're a favorite guy or an unpopular guy, these are some of the design principles of internet. It tries not to discriminate. It tries to be this decentralized communication tool that doesn't need the centralized switchboard that characterizes the telephone network, right? It's a completely different way of communication. But after, the whole e-commerce thing really took off, commercialization of the internet started, and we turned to a mainframe like client-server model with the internet companies. All of the internet companies use this model, except a few, like Napster did otherwise. They hated it for that, right? So very few companies had P2P products. Most use this centralized server farm, where we had to authenticate and go through, and all your data is kept there, right? And a lot of these sites also, try to market your data or sell it, without you really knowing what's going on, and even Facebook nowadays does that. They try to monetize your data, like that's a big deal. But this was not the original vision. The original vision was applications would work peer-to-peer by sending messages directly across, my computer and your computer. So to have this video conversation, we wouldn't have to go through any Microsoft servers, but now we do. And that's a big problem. Now that's the technology part, right? But what would this technology enable? Like, what could it replace or enhance? Now it's obviously it can enhance commerce. It can make e-commerce, electronic commerce, peer-to-peer, without needing any central authority. Now that's Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, sure. And Bitcoin, that's part of the reason it's been so controversial is like it wipes out the middleman. Like Facebook wants this internet.org thing. And it's essentially internet.org is just one big middleman that, that's even more powerful than what Facebook is, because it gets to control become an intermediary over the whole internet, not just the social networking part and to a smaller degree the video networking part of the internet. Yeah, I totally agree. Peer-to-peer networks challenge, they challenge the state, they challenge big companies.
Yeah. Exactly. Like it challenges the power establishment, right? So so that's a big deal, and didn't really happen yet. And we saw just the tip of the iceberg with the Bitcoin.
You can't get WikiLeaks. You can't get a WikiLeaks emerging from one of these internet.orgs or a Facebook controlled or middleman run internet economy.
No, absolutely not, because governments will control it and they will shut you down. They might even shut you down, because you're talking too much.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so that's a real problem, and it's not imaginary. Okay, so it's not an imaginary problem. It's a real problem. Then, I prepared this proposal for actually the 2017 Global Challenges Foundation wanted people to think about a replacement for United Nations. Okay, so that's like a utopian vision, really. And I thought, what can we do with decentralization technology? Actually, one of the winners proposed something, much simpler, like from US, but organizers were, I found out later, like this right-wing organization, right? Templeton Foundation, those conservative, Christian fundamentalist views were actually behind Templeton Foundation. They don't really like progressive people like me. I can tell you that. Now, of course, Templeton Foundation, this Christian fundamentalist, Catholic, anti-establishment organization is also behind all these fake transhumanist organizations, right? And I think you're familiar with a lot of them. And I wondered if you noticed that they are fake organizations. Right, so Future of Life Institute, Future of Humanity Institute, Machine Intelligence Research Institute, Eray, all of these are fake transhumanist organizations, and they're anti-AI, they're anti-technology, neo-Luddite, Christian fundamentalist organizations. So it wouldn't appear that way, though. Like it will look like they are very progressive, because that's how regressive people roll nowadays. They pretend to be progressive. Like, you have people like Hillary Clinton who pretends to be like progressive, like when she's just, in neocon, obviously. Right, she's a neocon. So that's quite funny, because it shows you just how easy it is to fool people on the internet. Like, you can say anything and people will fall for it. Like you say, oh yeah, sure, buddy, I'm a transhumanist, and although you're this, Tory Christian fundamentalist or whatever, you can pass off as a transhumanist because you have a website that says it. So you have to be really, really picky about the information you see on the net, and you have to, be you have to think for yourself. You have to be skeptical because a lot of it is really fake, especially anything that relates to policy making. So, fake news is one of the big issues, and with these centralized information systems, media systems, fake news stuff is going to go on, and that's one of the things decentralization could help, because it's much harder to censor information on decentralized network. And well, you can design it so that it's not censorable. So, let me tell you why that's important. They shut down Usenet because of that. Usenet didn't die off. They shut it down. They didn't like it. Okay? Because on Usenet, this is when the whole WikiLeaks things and everything began, right? There was Usenet then. And Usenet was free. Nobody could block it. And that's how there were a lot of political news groups in there. And they exposed the facts, the truth about the Iraq war, how the the WMD news was fake. A lot of those conspiracy theories, conspiracy theory, were going on Usenet, and they didn't like that, so they shut it down. They thought, okay, we'll replace this with centralized information systems where we can censor anything that's not so dangerous. So anyhow, so that's one aspect. But decentralized governance, of course, covers all aspects of political process. Anything goes, really. So what was my idea? Of course, my idea is from the transhumanist perspective. And there's a global challenge that we just talked about, which is global warming, right? And we can't tackle it. Why? Because global collaboration is currently, in this state, is almost impossible. You have to go through this completely obsolete international system, the United Nations, that's really a relic of colonialism. Really, it is. It doesn't really give voice to hundreds of other nations, that are not in some top select 5 or 10 or whatever, like G9 or G5 or G20, or there are some important nations and there are not so important nations, right? And how about the opinions of people living in those countries? Like, even in USA, like, do they contribute in any meaningful way towards UN resolutions or, debate? I don't think so, It's a very indirect kind of representation, you see. So that's a problem. And that's a problem I wanted to tackle. I thought, the voices of the people must be heard above politicians. So that's a very unpopular idea, I know. My proposal was direct democracy, and it still is. I believe that a lot of the organizations within UN can be replaced by net assemblies. That's the essence of the proposal. Let's run them as democratic organizations, and citizens of the countries actually vote for the issues. They just, they just have an app on their mobile phone, yeah, and they can just click and tell their leaders what they want, and the leaders would have to listen.
That sounds very much
even if
like
just a little.
It sounds very much like Flux. Do you know Flux, the Flux Party?
No.
Okay, so here in Australia, we have a political party called the Flux Party. I'll bring it up for you. And that's essentially the same thing. They don't have representatives essentially with any particular view. that would get voted in, but they have representatives that basically have an app that say, hey, we're going to vote on proposal X. What does the community want? And then they vote for that proposal based on direct democracy. So I'm just bringing up the logo here.
All right. Cool.
This is a Flux Party. I'll just bring up the logo on the screen. But this is an Australian.
All right.
Basic blockchain, decentralized, direct democracy party, and yeah, these guys have here you go. It's time to fix democracy. Vote the Flux system. Flux is Australia's most transparent political party. When did our politics become so broken? Things must change. Flux is your way to participate directly in Parliament, empowering people in the government decisions directly through technology. Let's break up the party politics and the gridlock and return to the power where it belongs, to you. This is us in a nutshell. We're fed up with the.
It's very impressive and progressive, really.
Yeah. I can. They've got a little video here. Do you want me to play the little video?
Yeah, sure. Right. Let people see it. Yeah. Think about it.
Yeah, because it's essentially what you were talking about. But this is a real party, and they did quite substantial. They did quite well in Australia here. They didn't do poorly for a technology-based political party. They didn't do too bad.
Politics sucks. We're all fed up. It's clear that in the 21st century,
politics
the system of
sucks.
democracy that once served us has lost its way. What we need isn't a new government. We need a new system, one which will deliver Australians the democracy we deserve. Say hello to Flux, a revolutionary new democratic movement to give you direct access to the decision-making process. Through an app on your phone, you can vote directly on legislation before Parliament. It's as simple as yes or no, or choose a representative who votes on your behalf and can be changed at any time. Flux keeps decision makers accountable. But that's not what makes Flux truly remarkable. You might have heard about issue-based politics, where the decision makers change with each issue. Specialists decide policy, not career politicians. Flux lets voters trade their votes.
Right, lobbyists decide the policy, they write the bills.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the problem. It's like you and me, right? We might agree on, let's say 60 or 70% of the issues, but we really strongly disagree on one thing that's the 10% issue, and that's a really important thing. But then we both have to fall under the same person, and that's how they end up trapping you. That's how they trap you in these democratic systems. It's like they use these front people like Andrew Yang or Bernie Sanders to trap people in these ideological things. Then you end up having to always vote the worst best option, and so you end up in this cycle of nothing forever.
Right. So the issues are bundled up, and people's real opinions on the issues are usually blocked, right? So it's a kind of actual censorship. Like they're actually telling us, okay, we know you might have this as a people, you might have this opinion on this issue, but we don't really care because there are a lot of rich people here, billionaires, who are telling us to do something else. So we're just gonna listen to them instead because they donate to the campaign or whatever, or they just gave my niece a job at their holding, and that's why. Okay, and
progressives have been talking about this for a long time in a different way, which just annoys conservatives because the conservatives just don't really get it. But they've been saying essentially decentralized governance, but by saying get money out of politics, right? And that's kind of essentially a 1.0 of your decentralized governance structure, where if you can get money, if you can get money out of politics, then the only thing you're left with is good ideas or bad ideas. But it's ideas based as opposed to power based, which is money, right?
Yeah, I agree. Now, there's a movement in USA called Root Strikers. led by Lawrence Lessig, the famous constitutional scholar,
Copyright.
right?
Yeah, copyright.
Right.
Founder of Creative Commons. Love that guy.
Right. So he's an awesome guy, but he's really worried that liberty is eroding in USA because of corruption. Now this corruption has been systematic, legitimized in USA by this legitimate lobbying and super PACs. But everyone saw how that turned out for USA, and similar things go on in every country. It's just not out in the open like in USA, right?
Yeah, of course.
So the principal aim of such direct democracy proposals is to eliminate this kind of major corruption. As Lawrence Lessig would say, strike it at the roots.
Yeah.
And that would be the major benefit. Now, what people say, of course you wouldn't say this, but for the sake of argument, right? What people say in response to direct democracy proposals is, hey, well, we were told this is a terrible idea because it's mob rule. Yeah. Oh, that's so scary.
It's transparent mob rule.
Yeah, but it's good that it's transparent, because once people see it's a bad idea, it was a bad decision, they can always revert it. So yeah, sure. People can make bad decisions too, but is it likely that they would consistently make worse decisions than the representatives who are always bought by big firms? Probably not.
No, because it's issues that the main thing is, I mean, if we were talking right now in the 1400s when literacy rates and education rates were really low, I don't think I would be saying that decentralized democracy would probably be a good idea, because I mean, you're talking about a bunch of uneducated, illiterate people, but in the 21st century, most of the people are literate and have some form of education, especially in Western democracies, but increasingly all over the world. And they're more informed on issues than they were before. Now, that's a whole story about the media and the information that they consume. Yes, the media is an issue, but I mean, these people can go and research things on the internet for themselves and look up papers and stuff like that. And again, I can see the government swamping. I mean, it'd be hard because, like, for example, I mean, what if they make the United Nations makes the direct democracy process so clunky? They pump out hundreds or thousands of voting resolutions a day, and they say, oh, the people just didn't vote, so we went to an automatic delegate thing. Like, I can see the United Nations or a big government playing all these games, but the problem is, try and frustrate the people. But I reckon there would be a lot of groups, direct democracy groups, media orgs like Democracy Now, and people in general who benefit from that system, with it representatives within the country that benefit from the system. Smaller countries would rally together on this, and they would say, hey, we don't want these big games. We don't want all this obstructionist stuff coming from the United Nations. We want actually what we signed up for, which would be direct democracy resolutions, that we can vote on.
Right. Exactly. So I think a lot of the current objections of politicians to such technological methods or stuff that would substantially improve governance or state functions is basically the instinct to preserve the status quo. But on the other hand, they must probably acknowledge that whatever methods they've been using is not working out so well.
Well, you're right, and why I like this conversation a lot, because you're right, and B, because it goes to this broader discussion point of the fact that people, the coal, oil, and gas industry, predominantly in cahoots with the finance industry, are pretty much the guys in power right now, and they are I mean, people, yourself, and we're not going down this road, but we can talk about conspiracies within transhumanism till the cows come
Yeah.
home.
Right.
But in all retrospect, these guys are such minor players. It's easy to see, okay? But when you actually look up to the big boys, these people, they want the gas oil industry and all that. I mean, they've had a monopoly on power and money for 200, 300, 400 years now with the trains and everything. They
Amazing, right?
don't want these cryonics or these cybernetic technologies or these AGIs or mind uploading or mega scale engineering projects or autonomous self. They don't want them in the power of the people or of minor states or of anyone who can challenge and threaten the status quo. And even the United Nations for them gets in the way of that. The United Nations is actually a smaller player in that, and that's why you're talking about lobbyists having so much power, because the United Nations isn't really the game. It's the halls of Congress right now. It's the halls of the Senate. If you can win that, you don't need it, because the United Nations is kind of just an arm of U.S. diplomacy. I mean, they don't really not really too worried about. You can have a lobbyist in there, but your ROI is less than if you have a lobbyist in the Senate or the House or in the Congress. So if you're an investor and you're thinking which political play, I'm going to go with the American government right now every single time. That might change in the future. Maybe you're looking at Asia. Maybe you're looking at the new BRICS thing. Maybe you're looking at something else. But the Asian Investment Bank or something like that, or China. But right now, where we're sitting, it's still, you're talking about Congress. You're still talking about the Senate. So, and these guys do not want people in general to have that technology, and that's what Ray Kurzweil's going on about, and Google, and thank God, he's in there with Google talking about these things, because Google is essentially the big boy in the emerging world, and they would and could have the power to democratize these technologies, but they also have the power to not democratize them and also become a bad player, a bad actor. So, so these are really important discussions, because I would like to see the price point drop and these technologies proliferated around society at a reasonable price that people can access, just like the Genome Project, just like travel with flight, just like a lot of like a lot of antibiotic medicines and preventions and cures, and I want to see cancer treatment for everyone, and I don't want I want to see Tesla technology, like Tesla cars and things around the world, as opposed to oil and gas. I want to see all this stuff. I want to see a free and open internet. But it all challenges the status quo, and it's getting over that hump, right?
Right. So it's in some sense, it's like, something's in the air. Everyone knows it, I suppose, right? So we need some major change, revolutionary change towards a better world, and these emerging technologies enable that utopian vision is no more utopian; it's quite feasible, and that's a big change.
You're living there close to where the Arab Spring happened, and the Arab Spring ignited because essentially the cost of bread in Egypt went up too much. So these foodstuffs became too expensive, and it tipped people over the edge. And then from there, they started to ask for more freedoms and more demands, like democracy and away from certain regimes and things. And it feels like that that this may or may not, but I feel like we could have an Arab Spring moment, in the fact that it starts off with something else, and then there's a bleeding out to these larger issues. WikiLeaks with their leak on WikiLeaks was almost that moment, and for some reason it just didn't maintain that energy, but it was very, very, very close to doing that. I mean, very close. And I mean, Julian Assange, something might happen there, and it might, because that's why they have to be very careful with that whole case. But
Right.
there is energy there. It's just, it didn't translate. It just, people get more excited over, Cash Me Outside Girl than they do Julian Assange. But there is an energy there.
All right, so I agree. There was an urge. Maybe it didn't cross this particular threshold to, really get people to move, but it didn't start rolling. But there was this energy. People were really excited, and this was the time when the veil of the establishment was lifted for the first time in many decades.
Collateral murder shook the world. That video,
Right.
that shook the world. I mean, people couldn't ignore it then. They couldn't ignore it. They said, all right.
And they shouldn't. They shouldn't ignore it. They should act on that information. But they can't. So there is a rub, right? Now, we have access to the information, but we can't act on it. So what good is it, really,
That's why these talking about these proposals of decentralized governance are essential. And Ben Zion, who's now probably the candidate now. I'm not sure what the time is, but he's probably been announced at Radfest. So he's probably the candidate of the USTP. He's talking about working with a small government, whether that be Estonia or San Marino or somebody else, on these initiatives. I mean, the Russian government, the Russian government has really strong ties with Cuba, going back to the Stone Age, and they want more crypto, entanglement with Cuba to get it out of the remit of the United States government, stuff like that. But these little governments within the orbit of the Caribbean, or Estonia, or some other, I'm going to have Florian Marcus on. Who's a blockchain e-government's emissary from Estonia, and he's going to talk to me about this. But these small governments are not opposed to some innovations in their own governments, because they know that if they can set up a small structure that works, makes them money, becomes more transparent, they can create a brain drain on some of these larger states, and enhance themselves. Then they can become a model. And you can't ignore a model. The only thing you can do is cause a coup and knock the person out who's that's the risk, right?
Right. That's a great initiative. Ben Zion's got a really good idea there, because the Estonia government especially, tried this e-state thing. They even issue, citizenship to other people outside Estonia, and that they can do some business there. Has some not full citizenship, but it's going there. So that's very interesting, right? This electronic state.
Yeah,
the division is absolutely right. Now, of course, we have some e-state functions. Almost every country in Europe. There's one here too. There's a website. You log in with your password, whatever. You can use a digital signature too, and then you have this various state departments, right? Ministries, and they have all kinds of services, and you can use them online. So that's kind of like a centralized vision of e-states. It's an electronic state, but it's centralized, just like in good old days. Now, the new proposal is that we can decentralize these functions entirely. So let's revisit the technology part. This is really simple. It's just like using Bitcoin. You're using public key cryptography. You have a public key and a private key that you keep to yourself. You can use these keys to log into the services, and this includes stuff like voting, direct democracy, but also all kinds of registration, banking, whatever whatever functions the state can present to the citizens. But the important thing is that you can use public key cryptography to make this completely transparent and private and publicly verifiable. So nobody can really really forge the votes. Your vote is private. nobody can figure out who voted for what, etc. And you can digitally verify the voting trail. So this is, of course, ongoing research, but it already works. There are already working decentralized cryptographic voting protocols. In fact, one of them was, I think, adopted by the ICO project Votem, right? So that's an interesting project that's advised by Emin Günserer, the inventor of the Avalanche protocol, which is a distributed consensus protocol for cryptocurrency systems. Now, okay, so let me expand on this idea a little more. I call it the cyber state. And it's nothing short of a cyber revolution, but it's not a minarchist approach. I'm not saying like let's minimize state. That would be the approach of the Bitcoin community, which is more of the right-wing libertarian types, and a lot of them especially, and they were entirely opposed to governance. They thought governance has nothing to do with, okay, this is a money system. It has this certain conditions, certain invariants, like there is this fixed money supply, and there's peer-to-peer money transfer protocol, and that's it. You don't need anything else, you don't need any kind of governance on top of it. And then, of course, a lot of scams happened, right? But by a lot, I mean a lot. Like 80% of ICO projects are completely scam. Like you send your ETH to or some guy, you don't know where he lives, across the ocean, and he just, vanishes into thin air, right? So, and that's funny, So, and then they were discussing, like maybe we need some form of governance, maybe perhaps. So this is like the opposite of that approach of minarchist, attitude. Like let's provide, full range of governance to members of organizations or, e-states. So I thought we needed this because almost all utopian proposal, and that's very, very close related to transhumanism, by the way, like the Zeitgeist project. You're familiar with it, of course, Venus project people. Now, what they propose is very humane and very sound. It's the general idea of resource economy, right? Resource-based economy, RBE, is a sound idea. But how they propose to run it? Well, they thought we need this special class of people, like guardians of the system. But it's a special class of people, and these people are pretty much like the Politburo in Soviet, right? It's like they are like the party, and they have this really fixed ideas about how Venus project should run, right? And the people who live there wouldn't be able to challenge those ideas, and that seems like a really serious shortcoming, because they might not have the right ideas. Okay, so they might not have figured everything out correctly, and you go there to this Venus project town, and you see like the municipality isn't working. The sidewalk is full of litter, and you try to do something about it, and you run into this Kafkaesque nightmare, because you write to someone. Is one of the guardians or one of the special, like I don't know, like Knights of Venus project, and she gives you this like really obvious, response, like the voluntary processes required by sidewalk cleaning are have been postponed for the duration of the current administrative period, which is 8 months. Like you'll get a response 8 months later. Okay, so that can happen. So I said, and so a million other problems just like this. Not even corruption or anything like that. Basic stuff. A lot of things can go wrong in a society, right? And you need to fix them. You'll have issues, a lot of them. Now, how are you going to fix them? you see, that's actually the basic problem of any system that claims to be state communism or a communal, any kind of communal governance runs into exactly the same problem.
Yeah, it's
right?
it's an incentives issue, and it's a efficiency issue, and it's a resource issue. They always run in circles on those.
Right. So they never address that particular problem. But then I looked at other utopias. You know, I mean, in particular, H.G. Wells has this book. Have you read it? A Modern Utopia.
No.
Yeah, you should probably read it. You know, like he was one of the smartest guys of the last century, and so he made this. He actually predicted some of the the good stuff about the liberal society, the liberal democratic society, pretty well, and he went far ahead, very far ahead. Like the society he imagined was much more liberal than ours, and quite a bit more socialist. Like, I mean, anyone can travel anywhere. Anyone can just stay anywhere, and you have all your basic needs met and everything. It says very. His vision of a society was very fair, very liberal. It's not like the current commerce-based culture, but more egalitarian, more reasonable culture that envisioned. But still, he had this special guardian class in his book. So it wasn't a problem he could solve. It was like the big obstacle to the fulfillment of his vision, I saw. So and then you have the it can happen. The mob rule problem can happen too, because say like if you have a lot of people who didn't get a science education, maybe they would give the wrong decision about global warming, right? That can actually happen. Like they might be influenced by some some populist guy, or maybe a news anchor who said they trust, and that guy would tell them, "Oh no, the climate is fine and nothing's gonna happen. Like this is exactly like it's been for the last million years or so. We'll be fine. I mean, temperatures, it's normal, like it rises and then it falls, like it happens, the sun changes, whatever." It tells the story and people believe in them, and they actually give the wrong vote, and you have to act according to direct democracy, and everyone dies. So so that would be so great, right?
Yeah.
So that's the second problem. So
informed populace, yeah.
Yeah, you need an informed populace, or you need another solution, which is a legal state, where duties aren't
so is that
the same for everyone.
In this modern utopia, are you talking about people like the samurai? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Right. I mean, both in Venus Project and in modern utopia, there are people like the samurai, or Jedi Knight. I don't know, like just, or maybe we'll have. I mean, in our futuristic society, like Kurzweil disciples, like, man, we could dress up like Jedi Knights and pretend to be all cool and all knowing, but it probably wouldn't work, because that's not realistic. Like. And that's not how the world works. So that will never work, because if you have a very small group of privileged people, they will end up abusing that power. Right?
100%. 100%. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Even that doesn't go out to how wise or how much knowledge you have invested up there. It's about how much privilege through power that you get, and that over time will wear away at you, regardless of who you are.
Exactly. So how to solve that problem is, for some matters, for some governance tasks, you might need expertise. Okay, so you would probably need, in addition to direct democracy, a meritocratic mechanism, a structure. Right, so it can't be, this cyber state can't be a flat structure as much as we'd love that, okay, so there's got to be some structure to it. So there will still be different bodies, different functions, just like the UN bodies, right? So I thought, yeah, we can do that. We can have different assemblies, right, for every department or ministry or body in such a global organization. So that's also possible. So there could be this scientific assembly where we consult with the matters of truth. And we could also have a legal assembly where we consult the legal experts on how legal or what was the legally right way to do this, right? So the ordinary public wouldn't know that I understand, right? But you can still use the democratic processes within those bodies, and it will still work. And the other important principle I applied was no position is permanent or too long. Like if you get a duty from one of these bodies, it's a temporary post, and then your performance, your reputation would have to be reviewed, validated by your peers, of course. And this peer review condition or principle would ensure that people would try to perform their best, because they would be watched.
Interesting.
And ranked, right? And ranked, rated. So it's in accordance with your performance.
And that performance wouldn't just be on how you voted and decision-based voting. That would be your performance based on how you treated people while you were there, or how you conduct yourself and all that as well, right?
Right, but essentially, if you did your job well, and and if this was a benefit to the people, and your peers will be evaluating that, and it will be all very transparent. So there will be no, currently, someone like Trump gets the presidency, he abuses it until the end of his term, and he has immense power. You have immense power in one position, right? So that's not too different from being a king. And there are a lot of such key positions in any governance. And this could even be a website. You could apply the same mentality to even Facebook, or any kind of websites, or any kind of online community, but also larger communities and actual communities. And then you can apply these principles to decentralize every state function.
You know what? It's kind of interesting, because we're going to go out into the universe soon, hopefully, and colonize the moon and Mars. And these are the perfect testing grounds to take these sorts of structures from the get-go. The moon might be a little bit better in the fact that it's so close to Earth, so you could easily ship resources there if people make the wrong decisions. But but I don't know what else. What are you going to take to Mars? Maybe like some sort of military style command and control system, where it's all the resources are sort of militarily controlled. I don't know, but this is kind of interesting. If you want to start from the ground up, Moon and Mars, why not?
Right. That's a great test, but that's a kind of like an emergency situation where actually hierarchical control might be preferable. But assuming that you have in excess of 10,000 people or so on Mars, the cyber state would be perfectly applicable. And it would be a great test, but we can test it here on Earth too.
Yeah, with one of these one of these micronations. I think you could get away with it with one of these micronations.
Right. And still the the electronic commerce probably becomes an integral part of this whole deal because
in Hong Kong, you know, they have the Legislative Assembly, right? And one of the reasons that they've having issues, you know, marching up and down the street against China is because in their Legislative Assembly, they have seats that are that are for specific industries. So there's like a industrial relations minister, and he has a seat, and there's a finance one, and he has a seat, and there's an agricultural one, and he has a seat. Not just, you know, your normal, like here in Australia, we don't really have that. We have representative democracies that are based on constituencies that oh, well, we'll get him back. We'll get you right back. We'll wait for the internet to fix itself. We'll get you right back. We're having a great discussion here, talking about the cyber implications of a cyber-based governance structure. It's you know, it's cool to think about on a blockchain system or some sort of transparent system where the people could have more influence. All right. Well, that's are you there? Well, let's see if we can get Eray back. But what do you guys think? I mean, what do you guys think about what we're talking about? I mean, it's very interesting. Decentralized governance and the technological society, how AI fits into our transhumanist vision of the future, both in technological and social affordances of transhumanist technology. Yeah, like I said, there's a Flux Party here in Australia, and the Flux Party is very interesting because Flux takes out that vision and basically doesn't have its own opinion, and only bases its opinion on the opinion of the informed public. And here in Australia, we do have a very informed public. If you look at any of the metrics, you know, you can see that we do have an informed opinion. I'm just talking about Flux while I'm filibustering while we were getting you back.
Right. That's awesome, by the way. Like, I mean, that there's an actual. I think I heard about them, but didn't look into it so much. Some comments on like there are a few political parties that are trying to do this liquid democracy thing, but liquid democracy is just a step further than representative democracy. It's not direct democracy. It's not the same thing. So, oh God, again?
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Okay.
Hopefully not.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
It happens.
That's all right.
Okay, so I think the fiber rebooted or something, reset itself. Okay, so the thing is, all right. Now that part is important. Like there's some, as I said, there's something that's realistic about the mob rule thing. Like it's real in the sense that, you know, sometimes people who are not well informed or simply do not have the capability to make the right calls, decisions will be involved and they will ruin everything, right? So we really need ways to prevent that. And it has been generally assumed that this is not possible, but it is. I mean, at least with a bit of work, you know, you can't just translate the parliamentary system into direct democracy. You have to do a lot of additional work, a lot of additional structure. So, I mean, like just to, you know, encourage the imagination of the audience. So, for instance, you have different kinds of votes, right? Different kinds of issues, different importance levels. One of these important distinctions is local issues versus global issues. So you will have all these different sorts of filters, right? Different kinds of votes,
Yeah, sure.
different importance levels. Like there will be occasional but very important global votes that are very important, and this will require a lot of people to participate. And there will be like far less important things going on. Maybe things at the local level, like the sidewalk issue. You know, why isn't the municipality picking up the trash? Okay, so that's important too, but it's a lot less important. Right.
That's why we
it's
have.
a local
That's why we
issue.
have tiers of government today. We have local, state, and federal levels of government, and then those federal levels of government send reps to international bodies like the United Nations, which aren't really government, but they're they have forums and they talk about different issues in those forums. Absolutely, it makes sense. You don't want the federal government talking about like in Italy. If your federal government gets involved in the rubbish collection, the garbage collection, you know that it's mafia projects. So you don't want them being involved in those local projects. There's scams and things going on, right? So yeah, I agree with you. You need specialization across the different tiers. That's just common sense.
Right. That's just common sense, but it just hasn't been done in any such large scale system. It doesn't mean it's not doable. It can be, and there are many other mechanisms that are probably obvious but haven't been done. So the other thing is, in direct democracy, to make it work, you need the equivalent of constitutional law. You need a very strong constitution, or otherwise this thing isn't going to work. So it needs a very solid legal foundation, because otherwise, all sorts of irrational stuff flies and just kills the system, right? So you don't want that. You want this open-ended evolution of the system, but it has to be reasonable. You can't just go at it at random. So that's what I'm saying.
It sounds like you it's like a programmer. Like you just like you have a base software and then you get upgrades to the software, right?
Right, exactly. So you have this, just like the Bill of Rights, right?
Yeah.
So we say these are inalienable rights. Like I can't deny that I have them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So
the Bill of Rights is expanding, though. The Bill of Rights is expanding, and you need to have the ability to expand and incorporate new ideas and new ethics and new we're discovering new things all the time, and we need to throw out old ideas and we need to throw out bad conceptions. You know what I mean? Like the gun debate, for example. And I don't want to sit on the gun debate too long, but the gun debate, when the gun debate was enshrined in the Constitution, we're talking about rifles or muskets that fired one every 5 minutes or one per minute or whatever it is, really slowly. And now we've got electronic guns that are like you can fire off 1 million rounds a minute or something stupid, right? I mean, that sort of evolutionary change in technology, that mad science complex idea, where every year that you can destroy the world, the IQ of the person, the IQ can drop by 1 point. I mean, that's a real thing, and you need to adapt to that as opposed to just saying, well, in the 1700s we wrote this thing, and that's God's plan.
Yeah. That doesn't really work so well, does it?
Yeah.
Okay. No. So you'll need some kind of a constitution, and this probably should be a libertarian kind of rights-based constitution that gives people rights, and yes, the ultimate aim of the transhumanist project is to expand those very rights, the human rights. Is you can't dissociate a human rights issue from transhumanism ever. Now, in a technological society, people will have many more needs, and they will need more extensive rights. This has been voiced in the panel by main transhumanists, but basically, we would like to assure that whatever happens, the basic needs of the people are met, right? As far as the state goes, this should be, this should be the main duty of the state, I suppose, to take care of people. But now you have this technological society, so say you have brain simulations. Now that requires advanced computing technology to be available for each citizen for equity. Now, so you need to provide, as a state, as a technological cyber state or whatever, you need to provide this cyberization technology or whatever to every citizen, and preferably at no cost, right? So you have to make sure that people have access to computing resources. As you mentioned, like, we would really like them have access to longevity medicine, regenerative medicine, and all this fancy life extension stuff, and whatever might be available in the future, like maybe we'll have an artificial immune system that will prevent cancer, so that sort of thing. So these are all about extending human rights.
Absolutely, and human rights is right at the core. And talking about computing technology, computing power, so that people have access to this, that's not really a hard process, hard to conceive, considering the proliferation of mobile phones nowadays, and the fact that it's the chip the Moore's law is still happening, right? So
right. So,
and the energy singularity is not far away.
No, yeah, so I mean, like, we were expecting the singularity, but got the scamularity instead. But we can still get a singularity now.
But we can get an energy singularity. I mean, that's
right.
Elon Musk is pushing us there with Solar City and SpaceX reusable rockets, which will be able to let those solar panels into space ASAP. I mean, it's not a distant future anymore. We just have to take advantage of this time period, and then you have infinite computing power. I mean, it's great.
Right. So if solar can substantially increase the total energy budget, then you'll have plenty of energy for cheap computations. That's really nice. But you also need to make sure that people, are protected in terms of their data privacy. For instance, data privacy of computation, like someone else shouldn't be able to dictate my computations because I might be a brain simulation running on some computing hardware. So I want to make sure that I own that hardware. Somebody can't just change my thoughts on the fly.
Cognitive liberty. That's what Talk Spectrum is all about. And thanks for bringing that up, and thanks for Talk Spectrum for helping us out here at the Nation. But that's
exactly
absolutely important. I don't want to be I want an ethical mind uploading if anything. I don't want to. There's some really scary stuff that could happen if you got hacked. I mean, there's some brutal people. Time change. You could change your time frame and put you into some very, let's just say for the sake of this talk, very bad scenarios. That when you think it through, could be really, really bad. So I want to know that I'm free of that sort of hacking ability. Otherwise, it gets very
that's
scary.
Important. Yeah, so that's really important, and if you just let it to corporations, I don't think that's gonna happen. Okay, so that's kind of a big deal. Actually,
it's either it won't happen, or you'll end up in a Facebook world where you only have one or two options, and you can't escape those options, and your freedom to your virtual freedom, or it will be limited, and you can't actually create the worlds you want.
Right, and as our activities migrate to the cybersphere more and more, as we approach the so-called singularity, we will move more of our life into a cybernetic mode, and then the activities in the cybersphere will be a lot more important. So it matters who controls those activities, who has a final say. So your sponsors are doing a great job. So to raise awareness on this issue is more important than ever, because we're approaching to the most important AI milestone, which is human level AI. So it's now our capabilities, technological capabilities is about to cross a very important threshold, right? Because after that point, just about every human labor branch can be automated. So AI, of course, has a lot to do with this, and I'm going to come to that. But about direct democracy, one more thing. So constitutional law. Oh, God. Okay. Constitutional law. To change the constitution in a direct democracy system, you'll need a very strong majority. You can't just change the constitution in such a system with 60%. You'll need strong majority, like 90% or 95% or 99%, right? And the constitution is really the kernel for all of the subsequent votes. It's actually a very different kind of a system. It's not really like the parliamentary system, because if you think about it, parliamentary system rests on over legalization of everything. That they are making new laws all the time, right? So there is this record of laws, all the past legislations they made, and they all become law. But it's a bit like the king's words. They don't really fit into a logical framework. They're not even consistent. It's actually a very weak system, very weak legal system they're using. If you think about it, it's quite subjective. So in a direct democracy, the legal system would need a serious upgrade for one, and you would have to, it would depend on the importance of the vote. So there will be different kinds of votes, and that's how most of the concerns about the mob rule are resolved. The liquid democracy systems try to do that too, but I think it just hasn't been done at scale. It's possible, just not being done at scale. So the other thing is, of course, about automation and AI. Now, what does a technological society entail? It basically means that there will be technological citizens. So there will be like you and I, flesh and blood citizens. But there will also be technological citizens like robots or AI code that runs on the server, or brain simulation code somewhere, or I don't know, like some artificial life form. Who knows, right? It's just a lot of possibilities. But they will still be citizens, and these technological entities will have some rights. So it's not like you can all treat them like slaves. The rights of the technological, what we usually like to call sentient or conscious beings, is still quite important. And this will probably be the case as we offload more of our activities into the cyber domain. Now, this cyborgization thing is presently occurring. We don't notice it so much, but everything is going digital, right? More or less. Like eventually our brains will go there too, to play in a faster world of I don't know, new thing. Now these entities will need new laws, and a cyber state might be the ideal kind of environment to write these new laws, and it will be much easier for these entities to participate too. And we can also automate entire state functions, like say a lot of state function departments, ministries, whatever, they're about upkeep, maintenance. These are a lot of routine tasks. If you think about, think about the Department of Agriculture, right? I mean, they need to keep track of yields, crops, soil quality, things like that. It's a lot of technical work.
Yeah.
So this is stuff that AI can do very well. So it means like we can probably, preferably, also offload some responsibility, decision-making responsibility off our shoulders, but we will still be able to give, high-level guidance. So it's a true man-machine symbiosis, right? The original wet dream of cyberneticists, like man and machine working in harmony and without conflict. But it's not even that the technological entities, technological citizens, need to be subservient to humans. They can have more or less equal rights, at least in some aspects. Let's say like some of them might be mere machines, but some of them might have a level of sentience, classified according to a standard that people will vote about. Like, maybe it passes these tests, or it shows a understanding of the requirements of being a citizen, or it has enough intelligence and whatever to act like a citizen, So it's about, I think, standards, right? So that's a very interesting feature indeed. So about the meritocracy part, my proposal was that every pass could be limited to like 6 months, right? And we could use a true peer review process, peer reviewed by randomly chosen professionals. It would be very hard to cheat, such as this, man. Everything would be recorded on the blockchain.
Kind of like jury duty.
Right. So you can extend that idea, right? And all this, bookkeeping can be done by technology, so you don't have to worry about all the records being manipulated or whatever, because there will be reliable protocols that make sure that no funny thing is going on, and a blockchain makes sure that the records are permanent; they can't be altered. So it's pretty much perfect in that sense, and this approach actually resolves the main obstacle to the Venus project sort of innovative communities or startup societies. It resolves the basic problem of startup societies. Now, as you know, they try to base startup societies on this minarchist model, like let's just bring together a bunch of people and give them cryptocurrency and see if they can pull it off. But that really doesn't work, because sooner or later, you'll run into some gangs or something, or some. It will be preferred by people who like to avoid the law. Like if you're talking about lawlessness, the kind of person you attract is the kind of person who wants to avoid the law, right? So that's like that sounds like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, that was a problem. Like, those things, although they tried it, they didn't get tested by regular people, So these ideas have seen like next to zero testing. I think that's a real trouble, and it's not like these are even, actually, there's nothing controversial, okay, or even that much innovative or new about these ideas. I think these ideas have been around since the time of Democritus and ancient Athens, right? So it's just that we never got around to implementing them properly. So that's the funny thing. Like, we know for a fact that when you can apply direct democracy, it works, but it can only be applied. That's what we're told, up to like very small populations, or otherwise it breaks down because of the problems that I mentioned. So that's the popular view about direct democracy. But this is not exactly true. The cryptographic technology and mechanisms like moderation, meta-moderation, transparency, cryptography, security, these actually enable to the scaling of the approach, and it will actually work.
Yeah, it's because you're trying to get across a couple of big issues here: intelligence, security, transparency, an informed process, a legal process, something that will generate efficiency outcomes, and that doesn't have an escape velocity beyond what humans are capable of working within, including when we have enhanced cognitive abilities and mind uploading and either an AGI or a super AGI assisting us, be that benevolent or not. I don't know. Hopefully benevolent. But even if it, hypothetically, if it was benevolent, even then, that that would accelerate away. But us humans would still be operating on a dimensional plane that we would still need this sorts of integrations to function as a society, right?
Right. Diversity is the main proposal of democracy. Diversity of opinions, ideas, right? As you said, you and I perhaps agree on like 60-70%, but I'm sure you have a few odd views, and I have a few odd ones too. Even like publicly unacceptable ones. Like, I think the sterilization virus is a great idea because there are too many humans. All right, so okay, so that's the kind of...
It's the overpopulation. The overpopulation thing is something that comes up again and again and again as something that divides the transhuman movement. Some people say there's not enough people, and other people say, well, there's way too many. And when I think about the future of undersea colonization, when we have giant undersea cities and giant mega projects, I mean, in that way, I can definitely see that there is still room to expand for humans here on Earth, especially undersea projects. There's a lot of land that's locked away. There's a lot of land here in Australia that as soon as we have the technology, we can green that whole middle area of Australia. I mean, there's no way,
Right.
there's no problem with that. I mean, there's a lot of room to expand for humans, but at the same time, I totally understand this notion of right now where we are.
Right. Yeah. Right now, like, there are too many people because, as you know, like there are 9 planetary boundaries, and we breached like 7 of them, and this. Right. So, and if you breach the remaining other 2, we have basically, fulfilled Malthus's prophecy. And still, okay. So this is the science, right?
That's
science
a good point. Look, we didn't hit that. There was the population bomb, there was the Malthusian issue, and we didn't hit it because of technology runaway. And then we've just pushed that off. But that doesn't mean that theory isn't wrong.
Yeah, it's more like, as you know, you'd state this much better than I can. I'm not that well versed in these issues actually, but only as a bystander and intelligent observer, I can state some things. So I know my knowledge and intelligence is limited, like everyone else. Okay, so that's a crucial thing about democracy. We all have a limited perspective. Right?
A valuable but limited perspective, yeah.
Yes, but all of our perspectives must contribute to the final decision. Now, about this overpopulation thing, there are so many different opinions. It's actually interesting. Like, how would this system say, like, should we just keep on expanding, or should we control the population by some, global population growth law? Population control. I favor the latter because of several reasons. I mean, that I said, the breaching of the global boundaries, planetary boundaries. Okay, so that's a serious issue. It's not like any near-term technology is going to fix that rapidly. But what we did was we just wrote it off as debt on our credit cards.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
we never intended to pay it ever. We thought like magical things would happen in the future, and these would be fixed all by themselves. But that didn't happen, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. I think. I mean, that's my
Well,
opinion.
yeah, because industrialization, industrialization, the industrial revolution, although extremely necessary in teaching us a whole broad spectrum of lessons, was a very inefficient and somewhat destructive process for almost everything, and it was kind of the wrong way. It was kind of the wrong way to learn it. But thank goodness for the invention of electricity happening very quickly after that. Otherwise, we would still be stuck in a very awkward position, almost unrecoverable position. But electricity, and then closely followed by the computer, and then you're out of that Malthusian trap. You're out of the you can work up. The planet is pretty big. I mean, I don't know if you've flown around, but it's a pretty big planet, and it's been able to take a lot of hits for a long time now. And I think there's still a little bit of steam left in that, but hopefully it's people like you, it's innovations like decentralized governance, it's us thinking together and working together that can save it. But we need to put the entertainment of geopolitics behind us. We have to put the entertainment of the Cold War in the rearview mirror. We have to stop technophobia. We have to stop Ludditism. We have to embrace thinking about ethical parameters and ethical integration mechanisms of technology, democracy, government's ideas. Respect scientists and scientific thinking. We have to do a whole bunch of things in order, as a global community, in order to get ourselves out of this bear trap. But it's possible. It's possible. We have the tools and we have the technologies, and we need to develop them in a safe way. But there are holes there, and sometimes when I take a step back from the news cycle, I can see it all. But as soon as I plunge myself into the news cycle, then I really wonder whether the mainstream media and all that is entertainment. If it's just, or if these geopolitical things are real. I mean, I studied them, and there's a lot of doomsday predictions, and sometimes they come true, sometimes they don't. And thank goodness they don't. I mean, but the amount of restraint, like this problems between Saudi Arabia and Iran. I mean, the amount of restraint the global community is shown to not blast off into a World War III has been remarkable, and I'm trying to ignore it, just to think that everything will be okay. Wishful thinking is not good, but at the same time, if I drag myself into it, I mean, I want to focus on what we're talking about. I want to focus on these issues and these perspectives, and I know there's plenty of people out there thinking about that. I've been in that world for far too long.
Right. So, okay, that's like a really optimistic vision. Okay, I'm not saying it's illogical or irrational. It is optimistic, though. It's kind of like Steven Pinker's vision, where I mean, of course, not like that, but his blend optimism has been much discussed, right? As you know, like he believes that, like scientific progress is.
I'm trying to tell you that I'm not a wholly optimistic person, but for the intents purposes of this period of time in my life, I've decided to try and be a little bit optimistic. It's hard. It's hard. That's why I studied geopolitics. Right. That's why I did all that stuff, because that's just which one's going to spark the next war, which is the next one, and it's all the time, 24/7. But now it's like, all right, let's just take a step back and let's look at the broader issues, And next minute you're talking to Eray.
Right. So good point. About this global warming thing, this happened because of the constant failure of governance. people really need to wake up to this. This didn't happen at random. It's because the governments all around the world watch over for the for the preferences of a very small group of privileged individuals. This is why it happened. It's because it came to the fact that they view the profits of oil companies more important than public health.
Yeah.
Right. So, but also the value of entire ecosystems, the entire biosphere.
This is why anarcho-capitalists are wrong, because like there is efficiencies within free market capitalism. I'm not going to run it down. I think there are. I like some forms of free market capitalism. I think that's very good. I think there is places for a competitive economy, but at the same time, it's like once an industry becomes too big and too entrenched and it crosses into the power spectrum, then it no longer functions in free market capitalism. And so then you have free market capitalists saying, treat it as a free market system, but really it's moved beyond that, and that's actually becomes, you move into the realm of being a propagandist as opposed to an actual thinking person. And this is the problem that I have with anarcho-capitalists, because they say, well, just let the free market punish oil and gas industry. What are you talking about? It's not about the free market anymore. These guys operate in a whole different universe of meaning and logic.
Right.
You can't use a free market system on these guys anymore.
No, you can't argue with them. So that's what happened. Like, they are very dogmatic about their profits, right? They really would like to secure all future profits. They don't want to leave trillions of dollars in the ground, and that's what this is all about. At what cost? At the cost of burning the entire planet down. Okay, so that's insane. That's irrational.
Yeah. It's a species addicted, and it's not even the whole of the species, because you're there in Turkey, I'm here in Australia. These other guys are in New York. If there's another product, it's like, let's say a Tesla car, or let's say another vehicle. You know what? The average person doesn't really care what they do, what they hop into, or how they do it, as long as it gets them from A to B in a semi-comfortable manner where they can go along and feel good and show off. I mean, they don't really care what it runs on. The only people who really care what it runs on are the people who own the establishments all the way down the highway that goes cha-ching, 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 right? And those guys actually have the motivation to buy up the lobbyists and ensure and enforce a whole system, planet-wide system, that keeps that mechanism running. But the average family, average mom and dad, average person doesn't care what technology gets them from A to B, just as long as it looks kind of good and they can hear the sport on the radio. They're fine, and they worry about the cost. The cost is another huge one. If they can get a technology that takes them further, they don't really care whether it runs on fossil fuels or on fairy dust. They don't really care.
If it works, people don't really care. But people who own that particular scarce source do care.
And that's why the free market. That's where the free market falls over. It falls completely in a heap.
Right. Exactly. So the people who own those precious resources, who own the oil wells or whatever, or who end up owning them, by force or by deception or by market manipulation, not the best people. And you end up supporting
you end up supporting a whole regime. I'm not going to say any here because there's too many. Just pick anyone out of OPEC. But you end up supporting a whole regime because you say, really gung-ho support these guys. And these regimes are just, they just have that's the only form of income that they have. Otherwise, they're a desert, or otherwise they're a jungle country, or they're a failing mega nation form of superpower. I mean, you just end up supporting a regime, and you're like, you think you're all good because you got a badge that says, I love fossil fuel. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
It really doesn't make sense unless you are extremely myopic. And we, of course, transhumanists or people who care about the future just a little aren't like that. We actually care about the long-term view.
Yeah.
What the Long Now Foundation tries to predict, like hundreds of years from now, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the human condition? What's going to happen to the Earth? Many centuries after we die, personally. So it's just, I think, a different set of concerns here. But the problem is that people with the wrong concerns have too much power.
Yeah.
And a motivation to keep it that way. So this is actually the root of the problem. This some people want to keep their privileges, and these are insane privileges. These are not rational. If I don't know, you've been following this more close than I have, but if you ask people, about income inequality and ask them to guess, how unequal. They can't even imagine. They don't know. They don't have the numbers right.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah. There's a deficit there. There's a knowledge deficit there.
Right.
And it's just horrible.
Yeah. So that's horrible. But I actually agree with Pinker on one thing, and probably like very few things, is that I do think that free trade is an enlightenment value, okay? And I actually agree with the general idea of Adam Smith.
Yeah.
And among our contemporaries, Evonomics blog explains this pretty well. Like the original liberal economists didn't have the ideas today's capitalists have.
Of course, yeah. Because we've moved out of capitalism. Capitalism is a long gone, dead, old dinosaur of a thing. But yeah, keep going.
Right. So the criticism there is that this is essentially a perverted form of whatever liberal democratic or liberal economical ideas we have is completely rigged in favor of the 0.001% or whatever, and you have like 1,000 little tweaks and fixes that they put in place to ensure that this never changes, right? So it's basically neo-feudalism. That's what David Brin says, the science fiction author.
100% agree.
And I think he's right. I think the rich families of Europe, after this, whole inconvenient democracy thing, plotted a comeback, and they managed it.
One of the attractive, things about transhumanism is Francis Fukuyama called it one of the most dangerous ideas in the world. And I think it's true. I think because over 100 years ago, there was an establishment after the Gilded Era of the power base, and that power base has been propelling itself now very comfortably for over 100 years. And now we've hit an inflection point where a new idea and a new set of people are rising up, and either these entrenched folk either have to take control of that new system by buying their way in forcefully, or they'll die out, like, and go the way of the dodo. And I think that these type of people double down on what they know, and they eventually lose out. And I think they will go the way. This doesn't mean they won't get one technology, or they won't get one idea. They have enough money to get into one thing, but they won't understand the full spectrum of the challenges, and things like your digital nation, decentralized governance, ensure that they don't know what's happening, because there's efficiency mechanisms in there that write those people out of the game. I mean, if you let these AIs in for 10 seconds, hundreds of those people are wiped out in a second. So
Right. It's a lot more efficient, really. Like, and it's. I mean, the whole parliamentary system is based on the inefficiencies of the previous technological base, right? So you needed, you needed carriers to move secure messages. It would take a day or two at least, and now it takes like a few milliseconds. So that's like many orders of magnitude of difference now. It's a huge difference. So it's but that's improving even more.
Yeah.
These latencies in decision making, information gathering, analysis, all of this decision making stuff is advancing. So and the parliamentary system resists the adoption of these new affordances, new technologies
at their own peril.
So, at their own peril, indeed, because it's really blocking a lot of progress. It's already blocked a lot of progress that might have happened. So did you know about this 1970s NASA plan to build solar farms in space-based solar project?
I didn't know about the 1970s plan, but I know that they have been wanting to do it for a long time. I know it's been on the agenda for a long time.
Because they're science-based people, that
I'm always going on about solar-based farming because I think it's a great idea. I think it's the next step.
Yeah, I mean, like you have this. Space-based solar was the idea that you always get solar power in space. It's very efficient.
Yeah,
right.
It's 24/7. You beam it down via an energy microwave or something. It's great.
Yeah. So
very
it
little
was
repair,
scientific.
very little friction,
Right.
no dust.
Right. So it's a really great system, and they thought this would turn this space technology into something very useful, and we would go straight to space colonization, because we would be building infrastructure in orbit. And it would really change the world, It would really start the space age.
Yeah.
And a lot of solar energy tech would have been developed to make that project, possible. And we will be like 20 years in the future now in terms of energy, and we would have run almost no risk of global warming if such technologies had been, advanced and invested sufficiently, it would progress. You just have to put some money in it, right? But the British Petroleum and Exxon and those companies blocked this, right? They blocked this. They knew in 1970s.
They block it, or they block it, or they buy the patents, or they create a war. Or they do there's a whole series of tricks that they have. It's the old gunboat thing. I mean, but they do it
right.
not just with physical assets, but like I said, buy a patent. I mean, that's a gunboat trick. You just write in a gunboat with all your money. You block it out of the scientific system, or you threaten to sue people, or you have an army of law. It's too easy. It's easy. It's so stupid.
Right.
I'm so sick of it. Yeah, but yeah, go on. Yeah.
And when they ran out of all those tricks, they started this huge disinformation campaign to deceive the public.
And
right?
well done. We got the internet, which has been the fight back mechanism. The internet, with the internet, we've fought. The whole community, the whole world has fought back. And here comes Eray saying, let's just take this internet idea to one step further. Let's take it
right.
Let's take it. The efficiencies that are already built into the system, and all those brains out there, and all those ideas and all those conceptions, and let's formalize it, and let's use AI to help run a mechanism that will run these guys out of a job.
Right, exactly. I think the politicians' positions serve little purpose nowadays, and this was actually demonstrated very well, actually perfectly well, by the way, in this this comedians. Who was that guy that did Ali G?
But Barra Cohen. Sacha
Baron Cohen, Sacha Baron Cohen, right? So he made this show about America, and he wears this ridiculous makeup, and as an Israeli intelligence officer or some anti-terror expert, he goes talk to Republican politicians about gun laws and etc. And it turns out that if you pay them enough money, you can make them say anything. It's actually a huge revelation, like they don't really care what they're saying as long as you pay them.
They're advanced script readers, which makes you really wonder about what all the presidents are doing, including Obama.
Yeah, so that's quite curious. Like, I mean, how far does this go, right? Does it Obama too, or whatever, all those politicians, all those ministers,
on dirt, and then they stand on a pile of dirt. I mean, it's
yeah, it could as well be massive corruption, and we just, it's just that newspapers are putting out, as you said, the entertainment division of the military-industrial complex or whatever. Like, it's really like a reality TV show, and that's probably why Trump got elected.
I mean, look what happened to Comey. Look what happened to James Comey. I mean, that's some obvious stuff, man. Like that's not conspiracy. I mean, that he fired the guy.
Right. So that's really curious. Like we have all this power in the world, the creative power, right? The power to change the world for better. And now this has been amplified due to the advanced technology, especially AI, right?
Yeah. And you know what? What I think, when the founding fathers wrote the American Constitution, and they did it on a libertarian basis because they were trying to escape England and the tyrannists, and they wanted a smaller government and all that sort of stuff. That was 200 or 300 years ago now. I mean, someone like you is going to be a founding father of this new mechanism. That's going to be almost a liberty-based theory, but it's going to be a smart contract, a society smart contract that is going to increase the efficiency of the world output. I mean, and again, it goes back to the topic we also talk about. What's all this GDP talk? Let's get rid of GDP and let's start bringing in other let's bring in other measures,
yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, who can measure stuff? Well, scientists can, but are politicians asking scientists to accurately measure that stuff? No, they are not.
You see this?
So
you see this ticker? I want to invent a. If you want a job, I'll give you a job. We'll invent a new system, and we can integrate like things like, for example, 1 to 10 number on ethical AI development, and shove that into the measure, the matrix, whatever it is. I mean, we can invent a new system that calculates different features of a government. It doesn't have to be GDP and your commodity prices and stuff like that. I mean, those things are important and those things will tick over, but there are other metrics that are so much more important now that just don't get talked about, don't get integrated, and aren't shown in the wider society. I have to clear out. I have to go. I have another appointment. But Eray, wow. I mean, yeah, you're a founding father. I mean, of the new 21st century model. And this is something else I've been saying on this show lately. It's almost 2020. We're well into the 21st century now. There's no excuse to go back looking at 20th century thinking. Like maybe 10 years ago, we'd say, well, it's just, the beginning of a new century or whatever. We're almost quarter of the way through. In 5 years, we're quarter of the way through this century. And we really have to start thinking 21st century thinking. I can't stress it enough, that this is, and then in half that time again, we'll be halfway through the century. What are we going to still be thinking about 20th century models? It doesn't. It's so stupid. We're in the 21st century. We have to get used to it. We have to start thinking about these things. I can't stand what I hear on TV or what I hear on these shows, because they're all stuck in this really old, degenerate, old, antiquated, artifact. It's artifact language.
Right, as Buckminster Fuller said, well, we need a new model. We need to invent new models. We need new 21st century models. And thanks for listening. I'm really glad we had this conversation, because I hope it inspires the audience. That there are a lot of people who are really genuinely interested in politics and progressive politics, like Benzion, but also there are other people too. Let's not get stuck in the ideologies. I say something, whenever we talk about ideologies, I want to tell people ideologies is for people who can't think for themselves, right?
Yes.
It's just a code book. Like we need to get creative and rational, and we need to base our opinions on science and facts, and not just what we're told to.
I love that. I love that, because it's like getting stuck in somebody else's thought pyramid, thought structure, and I don't want to be stuck in somebody else's thought cult. I want to use their thought cult as a way to analyze things and look at how they see things. But I don't want to be captured by it. I want to move out of there and say, how do we integrate that one, the far left, with the far right, and see where those two are clashing, and how we can map it out for a better future. I mean, it's instead of having it there, you squish it down and you lay them out on a table and you say, all right, let's move the pieces around, as opposed to saying, well, I exactly conform to this one, and if you don't conform, it's all crap.
And we need this new, more efficient way of connecting the wants and the needs of the people, as you would say, because right now these are disconnected.
Yeah. Eray, thank you for coming on Detonation. I always appreciate you coming on Detonation. We always have a really good discussion. I'm really good we actually got to sit down one-on-one this time. Every other time you've always come on a panel, and had a chat. But those are fun as well, and we'll have more of those. But I'm really just glad I just got to talk to you about these structures and these ideas here on Detonation. Which it's really good. And we can change things. And let's keep in contact about some of these smaller countries, San Marino or Estonia, for example, which are two I can really think about right now. The other one I was going to mention, but I didn't really want to go down that road, would have been Switzerland as well, as another as an e-democracy. Yeah. And I'm gonna leave that one for next time, because that's one I actually want to do a little bit more research on, because I'm familiar with San Marino, I'm familiar with Cuba, and I'm familiar with Estonia, but I know that Switzerland is the big player, and I'd like to even talk to some emissaries or whatever from that region and see what and do some reading on those guys, because those guys are really at the frontier of what you're talking about. So I decided to just omit that for now, but when I have more information on that, I really want to dive deep into that with you. So that's really good. And thanks so much for coming on Detonation. Always appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for listening. Have a nice chat with me. We'll hopefully speak more about this stuff. I think it's really important and pertinent. Like it's very timeless stuff,
Yeah. And it's something we can actually do. We can have an impact on, for sure.
Right, and cyber revolution won't make itself, so we have to contribute. And we would be some of the most well-equipped people on Earth as transhumanists to think about these ideas. So I think our input might actually be important.
Absolutely. All right, thanks very much, Eray. Always a pleasure.
Welcome, see ya.
Detonation, all more coming to you all this way, all this week.